We're continuing a journey of reflecting through what's in our heart, specifically regarding one subject matter. And this has been a journey that builds each step along the way. So if you're watching, this is video 10. If you have not watched the previous 9 in order, you won't really be on the same page. And not that I'm convincing you of something, it's just the reflection won't quite work if you go out of order. So if you have not watched the previous 9 videos, I encourage you, please go back and watch the first 9 videos in order before you listen to video 10. Now, hopefully you have done that if you're continuing. And today we want to discuss the idea of our discussion being dangerous. So we're talking about the issue of race and the conflicts that are there. Is it dangerous to have this conversation at all? And here's some challenges in working out this issue. One is, what if the problem does not exist or not in the forms that we are considering? So, and are we potentially being suggestive, making people feel like there's an issue when there isn't an issue that is there? And if you've ever explored this with someone who is black or someone who is a minority, you may have found minorities that have told you there are no problems. No, there's no issues. There's no problems. And that kind of baffles you because you think, I thought there was a big problem, and this person is saying that there is no problem. And so am I, again, being suggestive and just making people think that a problem exists that does not exist? And that really is a challenge. And one, we'll think through this for a second, but one, I really think that there is a problem. But secondly, I think that not every person is prejudiced and racist. And not every negative action towards an individual is motivated by race. That does not mean that there aren't actions that are. And I think that's part of the challenge. I think sometimes those who are opposed to this being a real issue will always look to point out the examples of which somebody was called racially motivated when they weren't. But again, just because someone does the right thing somewhere doesn't mean somebody else isn't doing the wrong thing somewhere else. Now, on the other side, just pointing out the examples of people doing things that are racially motivated does not mean that everything is racially motivated. But how do we work that out without, again, being suggestive and making people feel like there is a problem when there is not? And in fact, I've heard people even say that things were a lot better before Martin Luther King started stirring things up. So one, that kind of goes against biblical principles. Biblical principles say that we should examine ourselves, we should challenge one another. So it is more than appropriate. In fact, it's even a mandate to do constant examination, especially of our hearts. So to say that that's a problem, that barks up a tree of leading to a lot of sin issues if we say we're not even going to discuss whether or not there is a problem. So I think we should have the conversation, but again, there are a lot of complexities to it. So what about the person, the minority that you spoke to, that said there are no problems? It might be true that they never experienced a problem. We don't want to make them think that there is something there that isn't, and make them start to assume everything's racially motivated when it is not. However, have you ever thought about that there is a majority and a minority, that hence the terms? So white people are in the majority and everybody else is in the minority. Have you ever thought about if it would be intimidating, or maybe people who are minors might be afraid to say that there are problems to someone who's in the majority? Is there a potential risk in them doing that, especially if they feel there is a problem? But do you think about hearing comments like, and sometimes this is referred to Hispanics, Mexicans coming over the border, but you know, if people keep having more, if minorities keep having more children than us, then at some point they're going to overrun us and they're going to be in the majority. Well, that statement on its own is saying there's a problem. We are afraid of being in the minority because we know that if you're in the minority, there is a challenge to liberty and a challenge to do certain things when you're in the minority. And so we have to understand, just by the dynamic of majority and minority, that they certainly, those who are in the minority, could have reasons to be cautious in what they say. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not being honest and transparent, but there could be a guardedness that's there, and we want to be mindful of that. Again, it's what makes this whole thing tricky. To find a solution to race relations is not easy and not cut and dry. There's a lot of nuances, there's a lot of complexities to work through and figure out, and there's a lot of different angles to look at it. And so we want to be mindful of the possibilities. But obviously there is some kind of problem. We might not agree on the level and how far spread it is and what areas it is influencing. But if people are responding and crying foul, it must have started somewhere. I refuse to believe that this was just stirred up by the Russians. They saw a conflict and they exploited it. So something was there. I refuse to believe it was just stirred up by some conspiracy theorist, some socialist or whatever. Obviously, we've had this issue because if we go back to slavery days, if we go back to written documents, if we go to segregation, there's all kinds of examples that show that America has had this conflict. So there's obviously a problem. And so to say that we recognize there is a problem, but we're not going to look into it because that would be dangerous, that would create a conflict. We're choosing to stand back and say there are people that are being negatively affected, but it's not me, so I'm not going to have the conversation. That, again, I don't know how your heart could be right in saying that we're supposed to love God and love our neighbor as ourselves, especially the people who are downtrodden. I don't know how our heart could be right in saying we're not going to have the conversation. Now, the conclusions can, as long as we're looking for the truth, the conclusions, whatever they are, then let them be what they are. But we still should have the conversation. Let's not kill it just because that there will be conflicts over it. People will disagree with you. People will get upset in conversations like that. That does not mean we shouldn't have the conversation just because it stirs the pot. All of us stir the pot when it matters enough to us. So stirring the pot is obviously not a life principle for us, at least not for most of us. So we really need to keep that in mind, that don't just back away because it stirs the pot. Let's jump into, is there an injustice here? Because we're called to seek justice. That's Micah chapter 6. Is there an injustice here? Let's ask the question and let's look. Let's see. So here's where the danger lies, is, and it's on both sides here. I could, if you're believing there is a flaw and you look hard enough to find it, your mind has a way of making yourself be convinced that something's there that's not. So there is a danger in assuming racially motivated actions when they are not there. But again, that does not mean that they don't happen and that we don't need to examine that. And so, but the danger on the other side is if it is there and someone is being treated, or people are being treated unjustly, and I don't do the examination, well then how will I ever know? And so there's a danger on both sides, and we just choose which one we like better, when really we should try to walk between the two and say, hey, is there a problem? Okay, there's not. Well, let's not try to draw to any conclusions without thoroughly thinking it through. But if there's evidence, let's find the conclusions. So we want to push into this with a great deal of caution. And I believe that if we keep pushing to have the conversations, we will find a solution. But we have to be open and be honest, truthful, try to get rid of our biases and those sort of things. So let me ask you a question. Is it a problem? And again, if you are a minority or if you're black, some of this is for you, and I'm going to get into this in a future video. Some of this is for you in the sense of let's together learn how to communicate this effectively. And I really encourage comments from you. In my church, I have called upon the minorities, particularly African Americans in my church, to help me understand, because I'm white. And so you, if you are a minority, would understand the issue better than I would. But hopefully these conversations are insightful to you on how to communicate the issue to people who are white, especially. But a lot of these videos are more focused on helping a white person understand the issue. So I hope that you understand the dynamic of that, and I do plan on a video specifically about that issue. So if I am white, is there anything wrong with me when I interact with someone who's a minority, particularly an African American? Is there anything wrong with me internally asking myself, am I treating this person a way because of the color of their skin? Am I making choices with this person, decisions, saying things, feeling certain things based on the color of their skin? Is there anything wrong in doing that? I don't think there is. Now, if you just assume that you are racist and prejudiced, racially motivated, and those sort of things from the get-go, well, then maybe that's a problem, and that's not true. But there's nothing wrong with examining yourselves to ask, am I behaving in a prejudiced way, biased way, racist way? Am I doing that? Am I thinking, feeling this way? Every time I'm interacting with a minority, am I behaving that way? I think we should be alert to that. And if we see something that's a problem, then address it. If we don't see a problem, then just keep moving on as we are. And this is the nature of this conversation, is let's talk about it, but let's talk about it openly and honestly, and let's seek the truth and not a particular outcome. Because that's also the other problem, is so many people come to it with a desired outcome. They want to prove it's not true. They want to prove it is true. We need to come at it with no desire for the outcome, just that we want justice, and we want purity, and we want Christ-likeness, and we want the truth. And so we're chasing after those things. Whatever the outcome ends up being, we'll accept it. But we need to be able to pursue the truth. And again, Jesus says the truth will set you free. So I hope we chase after this. If, again, you have any comments or questions, please comment on the video, or you could Facebook message me, or you can email me at dleveck@bethelpgh.org. If you like the video, please like it, comment on it, share it. Again, we're sharing it on a limited capacity. Please share video 1, actually, if you're going to share it. Maybe share the playlist. But be selective in choosing people that you would feel would be they would actually have an open conversation, and they wouldn't just reject everything right away. So if you know somebody that you think would be willing to openly consider this video series, then I encourage you to please share it with them. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification button. If you're on Facebook, please follow our page, and you'll be notified anytime there are additional videos. Thanks for joining me.